Okay, hi everyone. I am glad you're here. I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Peggy Carr. President Joe Biden appointed Peggy Carr as Commissioner of the National Center for Education Statistics in the Institute of Education Sciences at the U.S. Department of Education in 2021, and her 6-year term will end in 2027. She's a leading international expert in education assessment and statistics. She's known for her contributions to the design, methodology, and implementation of highly specialized large scale assessments. Dr. Carr formerly served as Associate Commissioner of the Assessment Division for NCES, a role she held for nearly 20 years. In that role, she was responsible for national and international large scale assessments, and most notably, managed the administration of the National Assessment of Educational Progress. We know it as NAEP. She oversaw the the transition of NAEP from paper and pencil to digital based. So that's a big shift that happened in the time that she was there. She received her bachelor's in psychology from North Carolina Central University with a concentration in statistics. And both her MS and PhD were obtained in developmental psychology from Howard University. Before joining NCES, Dr. Carr served as the chief statistician for the Office of Civil Rights, where she was engaged in the application of statistics and survey methods in the field of discrimination, legislative compliance reviews, and complaints. Before arriving at the department, she served for nearly a decade as a research methodologist at Howard, where she managed a team of statistical computing consultants providing guidance to a variety of complex data analysis projects. She also spent more than 15 years as adjunct faculty at Howard, where she taught doctoral level classes in statistical computing, quantitative methods, and qualitative research methods. She's published in a variety of areas, including child psychology, social psychology, experimental psychology, biostatistics, student achievement, and assessment methodology. Her efforts have led to recognition, not just ours. She also just told me about awards she got last week or earlier this week. But she's also gotten the 2008 Presidential Meritorious Executive Rank Award and the 2016 Golden Apple Award for Exceptional Service. Dr. Carr's Distinguished Public Service Award of 2022 allows her to do a lecture for us, which is entitled A Bold, Inclusive Roadmap for the Future, Our Pursuit of More Equitable Educational Outcomes for All. Please help me welcome, sorry, I'm getting all my things mixed up. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Carr.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm always humbled when I hear myself described in that way because really I stand on the shoulders of many. But still, I am honored to accept this prestigious AERA Distinguished Public Service Award. I indeed have so many people to thank for entrusting me with crucial opportunities to advance education research in the statistical community as I travel along my professional journey. I would like to take time, I would, but I can't, to thank everyone today. And I can tell you there are many, from my childhood, college friends, my ambassadors for federal statistical community, and previous NCS commissioners, and I mean every single one of them, to my first grade teacher, Miss Bethel. She still makes me tear up when I see her even today. Some of you are wonderful mentors and supporters, and you're in this room today. And I say to you that I am thankful and I'm humbled beyond words. You believed in me, and I want you to know it did not go unnoticed. My official acceptance of this award was delayed a year because on the very day I was supposed to accept the award, well, I joined a club that no one wants to be in. My precious mother died. the person who deserves the lion's share of the credit for helping me to become the person I am today. Yes, it is true. I did participate remotely in some sessions because I knew that was what she really wanted me to do. In the year I had to think about this talk, the passage of time made me, quite honestly, a little anxious. I watched several YouTube videos of those scholars who have given this lecture in previous years, and it was, quite honestly, a little intimidating. But I think that we all have something very, very important in common. We love what we do. I am immensely dedicated to my work in the federal statistical system. I believe that it matters. I know people rely on official statistics and that we have a duty to the American public. For NCES, that duty is to report on the condition of education in this country. In the words of my grandfather, if you choose to do the work that you love, well, you'll never work a day in your life. My talk, as you heard, is entitled A Bold, Inclusive Roadmap for the Future, Our Pursuit of More Equitable Education Outcomes for All. But there is an underlining theme that I hope radiates throughout my talk today. I call it Beyond the Mean. To understand exactly what I'm talking about, I want to take you back to your first Statistics Research Methods course. As you know, the mean or the average is a measure of central tendency or the central position in a set of data. But the mean has this one big disadvantage. It is particularly susceptible to the influence of outliers. It really just does not tell the whole story. In many situations throughout my life and my professional career, I've been confronted with the use of the mean as a default approach for addressing an issue and describing an outcome or dealing with a problem. But I have found that it is important to go beyond the mean. It is my way of thinking about the whole story and understanding what is equitable, fair, and just in education research and statistics, and to the community to which I have dedicated my entire professional career. I would like to start my talk today by sharing some important context with you. That is, context from my family's history and my early life that has shaped my thinking and vision for my professional work. After all, a person's past shapes the present and the future. My formative years of schooling took place during the height of the civil rights era, the 60s and the 70s. Growing up, I learned a lot about my family's history and how it was symbiotic in many ways of the history of this country. It affected me, and I'm sure you, many of you, as women, as people of color, and as people who care about equity, fairness, and justice. This is a picture of my father's maternal grandmother and her family at their homestead in North Carolina. What's significant about my grandmother's story is that when the slave owner did not return from the Civil War, the mistress eventually gave hundreds of acres of land to my family. A noble gesture of the time, for sure. But Avery, the only girl, and the family line from which I am descendant, got nothing because she was a girl. It's one of the things that I think about when I see this wonderful photo. As a result, the brothers' children all rose economically far faster than Avery's did. and economic inequality of gender bias. So it's important to keep in mind that biases exist not just between, but within all communities. I grew up listening to the speeches of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the philosophical teachings of Malcolm X, and being influenced by the music of the time. I still remember most of the lyrics to Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud by James Brown, and What's Going On by Marvin Gaye as he pondered the ethics of the Vietnam War. These experiences really awakened in me a profound sense of importance of equity and fairness, which would later guide my professional pursuits. It was during this time that my parents made a bold decision to send one of my older siblings to integrate Granger, an all-white high school in our county, before forced integration in the South. My sister Barbara was a trailblazer, and I witnessed firsthand the challenges she faced, challenges that she really still talks about today. Look at it. This is Granger High School, and you tell me that this is not intimidating. It is a massive structure on the outside, and it was challenging for people who look like me to get a quality education on the inside. And you know the story. Before forced integration, we all had this notion that things were separate but equal, so we thought. I graduated from that very same high school in the first cohort of high schoolers who were forced to integrate schools in my hometown. But before I did, I learned that things had been separate, but they certainly were not equal, including those hand-me-down books that we used to get from the white schools. I knew from these early experiences that I needed to up my game to be competitive in the world I was about to enter. I received my post-secondary training from two outstanding historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, North Carolina Central University and Howard University. At Central, I received a single C on my transcript during the first semester of my freshman year, the only one I would ever receive throughout my entire 10 years of post-secondary education. This grade was a result of me enjoying the newfound freedom of college a bit too much. That one C served as a wake-up call, a reminder of the importance of dedication and discipline in the pursuit of my education. And I have told this story 100 times or more to my own children, to nieces and nephews, when it looks like they are losing sight of the importance of their education. When I was at graduate school at Howard University, I started exploring what it meant to go beyond the mean. For example, I developed a methodological design for my dissertation that included a 6-way analysis of variance repeated on 3 independent variables. I think I understood even then, in statistical terms, that complex behavior was unlikely to be explained fully by a simple main effect. Interactions were important to tell the whole story. And sure enough, I found a 4-way significant interaction that I had to explain to my committee. That was not easy. And before I go any further, I'm going to just stop here and put a shameless plug in for Howard University. It was established by Congress in 1867 to educate freed slaves. In 1867, Congress also established the National Center for Education Statistics, NCES. the federal agency that I now run, with the mission to report on the condition of education in this country. Ironic? Thus, my presidential appointment to this position gave me yet another reason to be a proud alumnus of Howard University. It is as if it was preordained. And I'm in good company with the likes of Thurgood Marshall, Toni Morrison, Roberta Flack, Vice President Kamala Harris, and Dr. Charles Drew, who pioneered the use of blood transfusions while at Howard University's hospital. And I would be remiss if I did not mention some of my current colleagues at NCES, like Holly Spurlock and Grady Wilburn. They were also Howard University alumni and also my former students. To this day, Howard University is the only institution of higher learning in this country, HBCU or not, to have a separate budget line item in the president's annual budget to Congress. As a young faculty member at Howard University, I was the director of statistics and research methods in the university's computer center. One day during graduation, and I recall this very distinctly, I watched 26 PhDs walk across the stage to get their diplomas. They were from various departments across the university, and I had assisted every single one of them in their quantitative dissertation. I was quite proud of myself. Then along came a gentleman named Paul Fairley from the U.S. Department of Education. Over a 2-year period, he all but harassed me to join the department. He eventually convinced me that I would have more impact in pursuing equity and justice for Black America if I used my skills to inform policy and shed a brighter light on inequities in education. So I left Howard to take a position as the chief statistician for the Office for Civil Rights. It's been tremendously rewarding for me as a public servant. And the role in the Office for Civil Rights, as I look back, it really was the right choice. That's when I sharpened my technical skills in the application of disparate impact and discrimination analysis. When I moved to the National Center for Education Statistics, I was the first person of color to hold a branch chief job. That means a supervisor. I will be forever grateful to Gary Phillips and Emerson Elliott for hiring me and believing that I really could get the job done. And I've paid it forward. The current team at NCES is as hardworking, as qualified, and as talented as any I have ever seen in my nearly 30 years at that agency. And it's also the most diverse. It is the right thing to do. It's the smart thing to do. A diverse workforce is essential for the success of any organization, for any agency. My position as the Associate Commissioner for NCES's Assessment Division was also a first for a person of color. I managed the National Assessment of Educational Progress, you know it as NAEP, the nation's report card, for decades. And I've seen it through numerous innovations and milestones since the 90s. We've been constantly improving how we collect, analyze, and report data and how we communicate about it. We developed the nation's report card brand so that the public understands its significance. Throughout it all, partnerships have been critical. I work with great partners like the National Academy of Science, the National Academy of Education, the Council of Great City Schools, the Council of Chief State School Officers, and with superintendents, state testing directors, principals, and teachers throughout this great nation. And there's a long list of national and international experts who serve on standing committees like the NAEP Validity Studies Panel, the NAEP Design and Analysis Committee, and they've done this for decades. And that is not an exaggeration. And it's not every day that you realize you have been mentored by the likes of Al Beaton, the guy who said, if you want to measure change, don't change the measure. Or you realize that you're helping to manage a program whose primary architect, or at least one of them, was John Tukey. That's right, that's what I said, John Tukey. The guy who coined the term software and designed a test of multiple comparisons that is in every stat book and used by statisticians every day. I have worked cooperatively with the board chairs of NAEP's National Assessment Governing Board, all of them. I would even say that I would see some of them as a mentor, regardless of their party affiliation. They influenced my out of the box thinking about NAEP and the tremendous responsibilities of the nation's report card to this country. I became the commissioner of NCES during the pandemic. Schools around the country closed. And who wants to tell Congress that we can't do a congressionally mandated data collection when the country really needs it? Well, that's exactly what we had to do. But we also pivoted and used the connections we had with school leaders to produce a new monthly survey through which we provided the country with updates on what was happening as our schools worked to recover from the pandemic's far-reaching effects. As I discussed some of our findings just recently with the standing committee of principals the other day, some of them wept. They said that they are glad someone was seeing them and reporting on what they were going through in the K-12 schools. This is a true story, and it illustrates what keeps me going, the people behind the data. And at the end of the day, they are the people we are working for. And the reason why we chose to measure what we measure and how to report on it to the American people. Now, I want to turn to what a commissioner of education statistics does best. I want to talk about data and statistics to better illustrate my vision. I have 3 examples. First, after No Child Left Behind funded NAEP to assess 4th and 8th grade reading and math achievement every 2 years in all 50 states, the District of Columbia, the Department of Defense schools in Puerto Rico, and selected large urban school districts, we learned a lot about states and district leaders and what they expected. In fact, I got a call one day from the office of Floretta Dukes McKenzie. She was the superintendent at DC Public Schools at the time. And this is pretty close to what she said. Peggy, can't you find some NAEP administrators who look like the Black children that they've come here to test in DC Public Schools? They would take it so much more seriously if you do. This was a wake-up call, not just in terms of equity and diversity, but for data quality, validity. They are not mutually exclusive. Example 2. I have enjoyed working for 7 secretaries of education during my tenure. But I will never forget how Secretary Richard Riley influenced my thinking about the lack of fairness in the NAEP report card. At the time, the report cards only reported mean scores in the NAEP achievement levels basic, proficient, and advanced. Secretary Riley, cordially as he would, invited me into his office and jokingly said something like this: "Peggy, I know what you're getting ready to tell me without even looking at the results. We have big achievement gaps, and Black and Brown and low-income students have not made much progress since the last time you were here in my office." Well, the thing is, he was right. That was exactly what I was getting ready to tell him. It was clear to me that NAEP was not telling the whole story of academic progress for all students. Our lowest performing students, especially those who were disproportionately low income, Black or Brown, and special needs, and scoring in the 10th and 25th percentiles of the NAEP scales, could be making progress, but the world would never know it. By focusing only on the mean and certain points on the scale, we couldn't tell what was happening within those intervals. We weren't telling the whole story of any progress or lack thereof that was occurring beyond the mean. From that point on, NAEP began reporting on the trends and scores across the entire ability distribution. That is the 10th, 25th, 50th, 75th, and 90th percentiles. And that's how we know that our lowest performing students were making more progress compared to their higher performing counterparts doing No Child Left Behind. And that's also how we could tell when the progress stopped. Our students who struggle the most have been declining significantly in the last decade or so, while higher performing students have held steady or improved over the same time period. And the pandemic made things worse. COVID had an impact on the academic progress of all students, as you know, but particularly damaged the progress of students who were struggling before the pandemic. Clearly, it is important to push beyond the mean to shine a light on these challenges. My third example. A landmark truth in advertising study of state standards. When No Child Left Behind was passed, states were mandated to set standards for grade level proficiency on their tests, to be accountable to those standards, and to participate in NAEP as a common yardstick. But states were also free to set their grade level proficiency standards wherever they pleased. As you can see in this chart, in 2009, states varied greatly in the rigor of their standards. In addition, many states set their grade level proficiency standards in the below NAEP range of the NAEP scale, the low basic range of the NAEP scale. NAEP shined a light in the way that no other could on how low some states were setting their bar and how different those standards were in rigor. It is not right for a student, wherever they are in this country, to be told that he or she is doing well when the bar is so low. So you can see in this graph, by 2019, the variation in state standards was greatly reduced. Moreover, almost no state has standards in the below NAEP basic range. Here, it was clearly important to push beyond the mean and facilitate fairness. This report is arguably the most policy-relevant report of its time. It exposed what amounted to discrimination by zip code, perhaps without malice, but it was a wake-up call nonetheless, and states took action. Now let's talk about the future. Here's what you can expect to see from NCES. The pandemic, along with the bold and daring 2022 National Academy's report on the future of NCES, had a profound impact on my thinking about the agency's future. Here's what you can expect to see. NCS just released 4 key strategic goals for the next 5 years. This plan represents our first steps in a bold new direction. It's on our website, and I would greatly appreciate your feedback. We're going to see progress in advancing equity indicators. We're working on a national equity index, an equity dashboard, and a better measure of social economic status, SES, than that eligibility for free and reduced price lunch that we're all really getting uncomfortable about using as a proxy. In my role as co-chair of the White House Subcommittee on Equitable Data, NCS will continue to actively participate in the whole of government initiative to better measure how well various programs are working for historically underserved populations in this country. More equitable data should result in better policies to advance equity, fairness, and justice. NCS will continue to push the envelope for more rigor in our international technical standards. For example, I was in Rome a few weeks ago for a meeting of the PISA Governing Board, where I serve as vice chair. At that meeting, the PISA Secretariat commended the U.S. for taking the country lead amongst OECD countries in charting new paths for the international community, including new testing and assessment standards, and moving from a 3-year to a 4-year periodicity to allow for more data quality and quality control analysis. Now, from my perspective, the condition of education in America and any participating OECD country or others participating in PISA must always be put in a global context, one that can be trusted for accuracy, rigor, and relevance. I also want NCS to launch more innovation, more innovative data collection and methodologies and surveys, such as the monthly school pulse survey that was monitoring and continues to monitor the impact of COVID on American schools and ongoing progress towards recovery. And finally, we're going to be working hard at furthering the Evidence Act of 2018. NCS will do its part in strengthening public trust in official statistics and building a richer, more accessible, more useful data ecosystem for evidence-building decision-making. I want to thank again the decision makers at AERA for believing in my work as a public servant enough to award me this distinguished honor. I also am grateful for AERA's steadfast support of the NCS mission and the values and principles of the federal statistical system that guide it. I will work hard to make us all proud. I also want to keep it top of mind for myself and for everyone else. This is an important field that while we are working and doing the business of gathering and studying data and making sense of numbers, that behind this rich information are real children. Students who want to succeed and do their best and often need academic supports and attention to reach their full potential. To the up and coming professionals in our community and those in this room, I urge you to build a career that goes beyond the mean. You will make the greatest impact by finding your passion within this work and focusing on what matters the most to you. And don't just take my word for it. You can ask my colleagues from NCES, Ebony Walton and Emmanuel Sakali, who are in this room with me today. And finally, I would also recommend a career in the public sector, specifically the federal statistical system. And I'm a little biased. I have found that work in public service is a very direct way to affect educational policy and best practices. As Paul Fairley told me when he visited me at Howard University many years ago, through public service, you can help create a brighter, more equitable, and yes, more just future for our children, schools, and the entire education system. I would highly recommend it. Thank you. So I think we're going to take a few questions and I'll sit for that. Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for being here. I would like to talk to you. Um, I love that you did it to public service. My background is private sector and not students. Now I'm transitioning at a PhD in anthropology. I'm dying to serve. I don't know. I know that I know that I can help. I have a son that also would be and after their mom. He had a struggle with when they played with he yes. In the black and brown, and now he is really that. Yeah. Please, if there's any recommendation you have on how to be I'm very involved with state level and active on boards and very active on state level. But I know my phone now. Any recommendation you have. Also, get in there. Well, what I can say to you, first of all, I'm sorry for your loss as well. It's not a club people want to be in. Um, but it sounds like you're on the right track in serving in consultation modes as an advisor. Yeah, there are lots of standing committees or committees where we need experts, particularly in your area, that help us in the government think through policy, data, whatever the case may be, to help further the cause. Give me your card. No, it's okay. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Carr, for giving us this lecture. So one thing you mentioned in your lecture is that if we want to measure change, don't change the measure. However, recently there is a powerful movement against standardized testing, and including college admission tests, including NAEP. So there has been a movement. There has been a call to innovate, to change the assessment so that they can more accurately measure student achievement. And also, in your lecture, you mentioned that you give an example. So you mentioned that someone told you, someone recommended to you that if you have a black test administer, could administer the NAEP test among black kids, then black kids will treat it more seriously. So all these suggestions suggest to me that we have to change the measure in order to in order to be responsive to the call, to be responsive to the public opinion. So we are in a struggle as a measurement researcher, especially focusing on literacy. I'm at loss where we are going. So where we're going with NAEP, where we're going with the standardized tests. Are we still encouraged to monitor students' achievement with standardized tests? And I'm wondering about your opinion on this. Thank you.
Well, I commend you for your question. You are not alone. I think my colleagues in this field, those that I converse with all the time, we debate about this saying, if you want to measure change, don't change the measure, and what it means in today's world. And there are different opinions about that. When we do bridge studies, and for example, you mentioned we went from paper and pencil to DBA, we did what is called a Cadillac version. We wanted to make sure that anything that was not the target skill, the target domain, really could be equated away. So we're trying to honor that sense, I think, of not changing the measure in terms of, the construct, the domain that is of importance. But I think it's up for debate, and we'll continue to have it as technology takes off and things are changing all around us. But thank you for your question.
Hi, everybody. Y'all not gonna say hi back? How you doing, Dr. Carr? My name is Zakia Ali, and I'm from Howard University.
Oh,
Ain't you? You know. And my Howard colleagues are right here. So I have a question about the future of NCES and the goals that you just outlined in terms of how you all want to utilize equity and those measures of equity. And just thinking about some of the conversation that Dr. Milner pointed out yesterday as he was defining, these consequentiality, that we're talking about in this conference, and it's interrogating consequential education research. So in terms of innovation, how are we looking to measure where students are with the backdrop of racism inside of the schools, and understanding how we look at data through different lenses, and how statisticians understand what's happening to our children through the lenses of racism? What are we doing about that?
well, again, thank you for your question. What I can say is that NCES funded a study on equity indicators back in 2018. The National Academy of Science published this report. Chris Etley chaired the distinguished panel. And they came up with, I want to say 16, maybe 17 indicators across, various domains, not just education, but other domains that they think are important to really assess whether there's equity in education in this country. And that's what we're using as a framework. Apparently, some international efforts in Europe and other places, and particularly in Europe, they have addressed this as a possibility of creating an index. So we're pulling together a conceptual framework for it, using that report and moving forth from there. And we'll have committees. We'll have people. This will not just be our opinion. We'll have experts to give us feedback as we move forward. And she's pointing to herself. Yes, ma'am. That's what I would say about it. I think we want to look under the rock. We want to look under the hood, and we want to reveal whatever is there. It is my opinion that the condition of education in this country cannot be known if everyone can't see themselves in our data. Or it could be just a comment.
So, hi everyone. I'm Jalen Patterson. I am a PhD student at UK in educational psychology. Just want to thank you for being here, as everyone said. Also, thank you all for asking those questions. They were really good and questions I was thinking about as well. So I actually just kind of got into statistics in the last maybe year or so. I am currently a research methodology TA in our department. I found out recently that I am the only TA of color, specifically the only Black female TA that does research methodology or statistics at UK. So university-wide, I'm the only Black female TA that's talking about statistics. So I know you talked about how NCES is looking at diversifying a little bit more. My question for you is, how do we get more Black and brown students in stats so that they pursue the field so that eventually they end up in these federal positions and other positions that are focused on statistics?
Really good question. A couple of things come to mind. Um, I mentioned that year that those PhD students walked across the stage. They were from everywhere: sociology, political science, engineering, biology, you name it. As long as they had a quantitative dissertation, I could handle it. So statistics are statistics, regardless of what you're talking about. I've even worked with Howard University's pulmonary specialists. I published their studies. I had no idea of the content, but I could do those stats. So the first thing I would say to you, it doesn't matter who's sitting around you or with you. If you know your statistics, you got it. That's what you need to think about. With regard to getting into having a path into statistics, there are internships everywhere. There are presidential internships at the White House. There are at the chief statistician's office, the chief data science office. They all have internships, and they focus on statistics. You just need to look. And I think part of the problem many minorities, Black and brown, it doesn't matter, have is that they don't realize that this network is out there and that all they need to do is look. And you need to connect, you need to do networking.
Good afternoon, everybody, and Dr. Carr. My name is Courtney Wilkerson. I also bring greetings from Howard University. And so I am also a school leader in Washington, D.C. And so my question comes from a pedagogical lens, which would be, what recommendations or advice would you be able to give to practitioners when using NCS data and additional metrics and measures to inform daily practice for specifically for Black children, but for all children?
Well, we give out a lot of restricted data licenses. And I can tell you, not a lot of them are coming from HBCU. So that saddens me a little bit. So I'm glad to hear that you're interested in analyzing data, raw data. We also have a cadre of tools. I see many of my colleagues from NCES here that what we call tiered access, that allows you access to these really complex data sets, but all the work is sort of, not for you to do, is for the tool to do, and so that you can get access to them. I would really start there. Their training sessions. Emmanuel, I don't know if he's in the room. I mentioned his name earlier. He runs all of the training for us at this conference and other large-scale conferences like this. And that's where a lot of people get involved. They get to understand these really interesting data sets. And honestly, when our project managers understand what people want to see in the data when they're in these trainings, that's how you can influence the types of indicators that show up in these data sets. So I would say that there is a path forward. Look for these trainings and go from there.
I can just add to that answer for 1 second. At AEFP, and then we did it a couple of years ago here at AERA, there's a session called Accessing and Exploring NCS/census data, but it's great because it shows you how to go into the data files, the documentation, the record layout, but it also shows you how to use all of the NCS data tools.
Mhm.
For example, the elementary and secondary education, there's a special tool, it's called ELSI, and we literally walk you through step by step. We give out a cookbook, and why I mention it, next March, it will be free. It was virtual for the first time second time this past year. So it's called Accessing and Exploring NCS Data. So you'll hear about it in the future, but it's free and online.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen.
Hi, Jonathan Osborne, Stanford University. Thanks very much for a very engaging and moving talk as well. My question to you really is, you're engaged in obviously running NAEP, but you're also engaged in PISA. And these are all large-scale assessments that are extremely expensive to run.
Yeah.
As you know, NAEP is unusual in that most countries don't have that kind of system themselves. In fact, about 90 countries now, I think, do engage in PISA. I just wanted to say how you would justify the costs to, say, other countries, okay, or how you justify their participation in setting up such a system, and in terms of what they think they would get out of it from that point of view. And it's just your perspective on that I would, as you know, PISA has a lot of criticisms because it sets up a kind of international league table that countries compare themselves, and there are all kinds of concerns about actually what it's measuring. So I'm interested in your thoughts on that one.
Well, let me say that NAEP, which was chartered, as I indicated, by it is congressionally mandated. When No Child Left Behind came along, it became not just congressionally mandated for us to administer it, but for states to participate in it if they want their Title I funds. I didn't say that, but that's really what it amounts to. So everybody participates. Every now and then there's a school or two that tries to wiggle out of it. But for the most part, states know that we are the second opinion in this country. We are the elephant in the living room. We are the common yardstick by which we can tell what is going on, because it is a constitutional right for states to do what they want to do in this country. But it is not a constitutional right to mislead our American public. And so that is why it is important to have something like a NAEP if you're a country in which that is your landscape. That's what I would kind of say about the importance of NAEP. It is expensive, but it's worth every penny from my perspective. And Congress believes in it and continues to give us the funds to do it. And I have to be transparent with them. They're always calling me and asking me questions, and I'm always telling them exactly what's going on. But it is the nation's treasure is what NAEP is. And I know that sounds apple pie and all of that, but it is the God knows truth. I am a vice chair of the PISA Governing Board with a couple of other countries, and I know the concerns that you're talking about, but we're working on them. I think one of my colleagues from the PISA Governing Board is here today. We're working. We're not unaware of what you're describing about PISA, but PISA has its role. But we're working on some of the outreach, to sort of going beyond the data work that they sometimes do. But thank you for your question. Yes.
Dr. Carr, thank you so much for your service, for the talk, and congratulations. You have such a long view of how educational information has been used to influence policy and implementation of policy at different levels. We're living very unusual times where the value of evidence and even the recognition that there is objective truth that can help people come together is being challenged like at no other time, at least in my lifetime. So I wonder if you could comment a little bit on the challenges that that poses to the work of your agency as you interact with the various branches of government, and whether you have any thoughts on what can be done to use evidence as a way to help address the extreme polarization in this country that makes it so difficult for people to come together and develop some kind of shared agenda for education reform.
Well, that was a good infographic, a good intro for what I want to say about the Evidence Act of 2018. What you just described is exactly what the Evidence Act is trying to do, to pull together data across the entire whole of government, the entire federal government, to develop richer, more accessible, more meaningful data sets that can inform policymaking and evidence-based decision making in this country. Because right now we're siloed. Um, HUD is doing this thing. The Department of Interior is doing its thing. We have all of these data sets, but they're all sort of working, in their own silos. And what this Evidence Act just says, no more. You will come together and you will develop rich data sets in which they have been linked and pulled together, because we can't really understand what is going on in this country unless we have indicators from a variety of disciplines. And that's what the Evidence Act is about. There's even a standardized application portal for researchers to go and ask for request data from the Department of Ed, from HHS, from Census, all of them through this one portal using the same application. So we're trying. So the idea is there, but it's going to take an effort to pull some of this data out of the hands of these agencies. But I commend you for the vision.
This will be our last
Uh,
Dr. Carr, it was fascinating to hear about your family history. Thank you for sharing that with us. I was thinking as I was listening to you that there are so many scholars at this conference who are critical of standardized testing. And they say that it doesn't measure what we want it to measure, that the tests themselves are white-centered, that they're racist, and that the results that the NCS reports show deficits, and that instead we should be thinking about asset-based thinking. I'm probably not paraphrasing this well, but I hope you understand the criticism that I'm trying to express. And I'm curious your rebuttal and your defense of this data that many people at this conference wish we didn't use.
I have another lecture that I wish I could have integrated into this one about this very topic. I am, like anyone else, concerned about the use of tests and whether the tests really truly reflect students' abilities. And so we are working in the measurement community to do things like improve measurement at the lower end of the distribution of a scale. Sometimes you can look at the scale and there are no items down there, or none to think of, none to speak of. But there are a lot of kids down there. What's up with that? That means that we're using a little bit of information from the student and a lot of information from the modeling about students' ability. We are aware of those sorts of things and we are working really hard to address them. Adaptive testing is another response I would have that improves measurement across the entire distribution, not just at the bottom of it, but at the top. A fairer approach to testing, one that will engage the student. It's not fair to have students to respond to questions and they can't answer almost all of them. So adaptive testing is important. Now, in our world of large-scale assessment, group assessments like NAEP, TIMSS, PEACE, and PEARLS, it's not CAT, it's not, adaptive testing at the individual level, it's group level, but it's the same. It's the same approach. What I would say to the first part of your question is that assessments in this country, and we have some international colleagues in the room, but assessment in this country really is a family of assessments. It's not just these group level assessments that I've been talking about, because they are not, for the most part, high stakes assessments. They are drop from the sky assessments that are meant to go in and take a peekaboo look at what is happening at that time. But there are other assessments that need to be married with them to help get the full picture, such as formative assessments, interim assessments that are done throughout the year. Then there are classroom assessments. Then there are assessments that are used to make decisions about students' entrance into colleges and universities or any other credentialing type of situation. You need all of it, a system of assessments to really understand what's going on in this country. I think that large-scale assessments like NAEP, TIMSS, and PISA, we need to do our best to not be intrusive, to not have as much burden on the system. So when people are talking about too much testing, they're probably not talking as much about those kinds of assessments as they are some of the state ones. It's a hard question, no doubt. And I don't think I've given you a true answer, but that's the context.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was wonderful to have all those questions. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.